It is a quiet, creeping state of internal isolation that silently drains the texture out of modern adulthood. You are executing your daily responsibilities, earning an income, and checking off tasks with complete efficiency. On paper, your life is fully functional. Yet, as you move through your days, you are plagued by a persistent, chilling sensation that your reality lacks physical weight. You touch objects, sit in rooms, and converse with colleagues, but everything feels slightly blurred, distant, or two-dimensional, as if you are watching a movie of your life rather than actively inhabiting it. Your days feel completely hollow, slipping past without leaving a genuine emotional imprint on your consciousness. Most people look at this flat baseline and assume it is a sign of an unresolvable existential crisis, a sudden depression, or a lack of gratitude. They force themselves to try mindfulness habits, purchase consumer goods, or change their environments, assuming their perspective is broken. But the reality behind this frustrating numbness has nothing to do with your spirituality or your mental strength. What you are experiencing is an acute, predictable biological consequence of hypersaturated neural pathways. Your mind is not failing. Your brain's internal sensory gating mechanisms have simply turned down the volume of the physical world to protect the machine from a terminal data overload. To understand why your life feels so hollow, we must dissect the neurological architecture of sensory suppression. To decipher the mechanical origin of this internal hollowness, we must isolate the precise biological filter that controls how the physical world enters your conscious awareness. Every fraction of a second, your skin, eyes, ears, and internal organs collect millions of bytes of raw environmental data. This massive electrical stream travels straight into the thalamus, a specialized structure deep within the center of your forebrain that functions as the primary sensory gatekeeper of the mind. The vital biological duty of the thalamus is to act as an attention valve, deciding which inputs are important enough to be forwarded to the cerebral cortex for conscious perception, and which are discarded as background noise. In a healthy nervous system, this gate operates dynamically, allowing the texture, temperature, and depth of the world to be vividly felt. However, when you live in a high-stimulation environment, the thalamus undergoes a drastic operational shift. It realizes that if it allows the full volume of data to pass through, your advanced processing networks will suffer a catastrophic energy crash. To conserve your brain's metabolic resources, the thalamic gate clamps down, executing an aggressive filtering protocol that actively strips the raw sensory signals of their vividness before they can ever cross the threshold of your conscious mind. The primary trigger behind this chronic thalamic restriction is the unnatural structure of the modern digital interface. Throughout human history, our nervous systems evolved to interact with a highly tactile, multisensory physical world filled with three-dimensional depth, changing atmospheric temperatures, and complex physical resistance. When you walk through a forest or manipulate a physical tool, your brain utilizes its parietal lobe to run complex spatial mapping calculations, creating an intense, high-fidelity sense of presence. However, the modern adult spends hours every day staring at a flat, glowing glass screen. Whether you are answering emails, checking markets, or scrolling through feeds, your entire conscious focus is compressed into a single, two-dimensional plane. Your eyes focus on a fixed distance, your fingers execute frictionless micro-movements, and your tactile feedback loops go completely dark. The brain detects a severe biological mismatch, because you are feeding your mind an ocean of high-velocity abstract information while starving your body of rich, multisensory physical feedback. Your internal mapping engines stall out. The nervous system begins to treat the immediate physical world as an irrelevant background setting, detaching your conscious awareness from your flesh and leaving you stranded in a weightless, abstract limbo. The deep, existential dread of feeling hollow is locked within a profound communication failure between your internal organs and your threat appraisal networks. As we have established across this archive, your sense of being alive is heavily driven by interoception, the continuous upward transmission of data from your heart, lungs, and gut to your brain via the vagus nerve. When your thalamic gate clamps down due to high stimulation burnout, it doesn't just filter out the external world, it actively suppresses this vital internal communication loop. This creates a severe interoceptive power outage. Your physical organs are still functioning perfectly, but the data fibers fail to deliver the low-frequency electrical signals to your anterior insula within the required 12-millisecond window. Your brain completely loses touch with the somatic baseline of your own flesh. This structural delay triggers an immediate cognitive crisis. Your conscious mind looks at your body and knows you are alive, but your internal processing centers register a total lack of emotional and physical vibration. Because the brain cannot tolerate an empty data file, it misinterprets this somatic silence as a profound existential emergency, converting a simple sensory filtering protocol into a terrifying, unprovoked feeling of psychological emptiness and permanent isolation. The immediate cognitive consequence of this interoceptive power outage is a highly destructive behavioral loop known as the cognitive illusion of the disqualified life. Because your brain hates mystery and cannot stand experiencing a heavy sensation of physical numbness without a visible explanation, it forces your prefrontal cortex to invent a logical narrative for the void. Your mind immediately assumes that if your life feels this flat and weightless, it must be because your choices are meaningless, your career is a hollow mistake, or your accomplishments are entirely worthless. It systematically disqualifies your actual real-world reality. It tells you that you are living the wrong life, completely unaware that the thought is entirely empty. The thoughts do not create the flatness. The physical flatness manufactures the thoughts. You are trapped in a profound cognitive trap where an automated energy preservation protocol in your thalamus convinces your conscious mind that your entire existence is a hollow delusion. If you do not understand this mechanical order of operations, you will spend your energy fighting imaginary psychological battles against your career or lifestyle, completely missing the reality that your brain is simply running its internal filters on high alert. To fully map out this psychological loop, we must evaluate how this somatic numbness completely hijacks your brain's selective attention filters via the reticular activating system, or the RAAs. The RAAs acts as the primary gatekeeper for your consciousness, deciding which environmental details are allowed to enter your active awareness and which are discarded as background noise. When your thalamic gate is locked in a state of high alert filtering, your RAS takes its instructions directly from your internal numbness. It optimizes your attention to track only the inputs that match its flat gray baseline. When you encounter moments of quiet beauty, simple sensory pleasures, or genuine human warmth, your hypersensitized RAS categorizes these low-intensity inputs as useless background noise, completely filtering them out. Conversely, when your environment presents you with hyperstimulating, high-velocity digital data or intense stress crises, your brain activates its attention networks, allowing only the loudest noise to cross the threshold. You become trapped inside an insulated cognitive filter where your brain actively deletes the rich, quiet textures of real life while hyper-focusing on the superficial noise of the digital screen, ensuring that your physical reality remains an unfulfilling hollow prison. While your selective attention filters are prioritizing digital noise, your medial prefrontal cortex is running an automated comparison matrix based on social comparison theory that completely paralyzes your current agency. Your brain calculates your sense of presence and fulfillment by running continuous simulations of your relative position within the environment. However, this comparison engine operates on a highly asymmetric dataset. You experience your own modern reality from the inside out, meaning you are intimately aware of your internal sensory numbness, your manual effort to stay focused, and the heavy fatigue running through your nervous system. In contrast, you experience the virtual, high-definition presentation of other lifestyles from the outside in, staring at highly curated, hypersaturated digital imagery on a screen. Your analytical brain automatically compares your raw, low-resolution, unedited internal reality with the gold-plated, frictionless fiction of the digital world. The system detects a massive structural mismatch. It reasons that if everyone else is living a life of intense color, passion, and meaning, while you feel manual and hollow, you have uniquely corrupted your potential, transforming a normal biological filtering delay into a deep, personal feeling of psychological shame. To understand why the human brain reacts to high-stimulation environments with such an aggressive sensory shutdown protocol, we must leave our modern contexts and look at the brutal survival demands of our evolutionary history. The human nervous system did not evolve to navigate an infinite, 24-hour digital stream filled with synthetic light, flashing text, and hyper-compressed data. For over 99% of human history, our ancestors lived in low-stimulation wild environments where a sudden sensory surge, like a bright light, a violent movement, or a loud crash, represented an immediate, life-threatening emergency. The brain learned to treat high stimulation as a signal of high danger, dumping cortisol and adrenaline into the system to prepare for physical combat. If a prehistoric human possessed a brain that kept its sensory gates wide open during a sustained environmental crisis, the massive chemical overload would cause permanent neurological toxicity and cellular death. Evolution solved this problem by inventing automated gating. The brain was hardwired to automatically numb its own receptors when exposure to stimulation remained high for too long, functioning as a mandatory chemical circuit breaker. The hollow flatness you feel today is not a broken design. It is the ancient, wise defense system of a primitive organism that has closed its eyes to protect its cells from a digital explosion. The persistent feeling of life's hollowness is also heavily driven by an artificial neurochemical ceiling created by the clinical structure of dopaminergic receptor downregulation. Individuals trapped inside this existential loop almost always operate under a rigid lifestyle framework that relies on continuous microdoses of digital stimulation to mask their internal fatigue. Every time you pull out your phone, refresh a page, or swipe through text, your brain's reward circuit fires a rapid spike of dopamine. While this keeps your drive active, the continuous presence of unearned dopamine triggers a profound biological self-defense protocol inside your synapses. To prevent neurochemical toxicity, your brain cells actively withdraw their dopamine receptors, burying them deep within the cell membrane. Your reward system becomes hyperinsensitive. This creates a severe state of chemical desensitization. When you finally put your phone away and step into the physical world, the quiet, low-intensity rewards of real life, such as the texture of food, the sound of the wind, or a casual conversation, fail to generate enough dopamine to cross your newly elevated threshold. The world doesn't feel flat because it lacks value. It feels flat because your brain has literally dismantled the physical receptors required to experience the color of your life. The long-term danger of navigating this sensory numbness is the severe accumulation of allostatic load caused by maintaining a simulated presence in adulthood. When your brain convinces you that your immediate physical reality is entirely inadequate and hollow, it forces your prefrontal cortex to construct a highly calculated artificial persona to navigate your days. You learn to manually force yourself to perform tasks, simulate emotional enthusiasm you do not feel, and fake focus just to blend into a high-pressure professional environment. From a neurological perspective, running this simulated self requires an immense continuous expenditure of executive energy and glucose. Over years of continuous execution, this chronic energy split completely exhausts your nervous system's buffering capacity. The high allostatic load causes a systemic downtime inside your brain's memory networks, plunging your mind into a flat, grey state of chronic mental fatigue and clinical burnout. The energy required to keep the heavy machinery of focus running becomes so overwhelming that your resilience collapses entirely, proving the digital stimulation you use to escape the flatness eventually extracts the ultimate long-term tax, the total destruction of your present vitality. When we systematically look at this entire temporal process through a cold clinical lens, we can perform an objective somatic autopsy on our existential dread and completely strip it of its psychological terror. The next time you look at your life and feel a sudden, sickening wave of panic, realize that everything feels hollow and two-dimensional, you must instantly recognize the mechanical order of operations inside your flesh. The weightless void, the mental fog, and the internal voice telling you that your existence has lost its meaning are not profound emotional truths. They are not an indication that your career is a failure, that you are wasting your time, or that you are fundamentally broken. They are simply the physical, predictable consequence of an overtaxed thalamus and a downregulated dopaminergic pathway running a data preservation protocol inside an evolutionary brainstem that is trying to protect your cells from digital overstimulation. The terrifying thoughts of emptiness your mind manufactures during this window are completely hollow. They are nothing more than a desperate fictional script written by an energy-starved prefrontal cortex, trying to find an explanation for a raw, mismatched sensory filter in your tissues. The thoughts are not insights. They are simply the neurological silence of a machine that has turned down its master volume. Reclaiming the physical texture of your life requires a deliberate shift in how you navigate the 12-millisecond logic gap. You cannot manually command your thalamic gate to instantly open, nor can you force your synapses to rebuild their dopamine receptors through sheer willpower. Your central nervous system is structurally bound to prioritize cellular survival over aesthetic vividness. Your objective is not to wait for the flatness to magically disappear before you engage with your environment, but to actively change your biological relationship to the void. When the wave of existential weightlessness compromises your chest, expect the internal delay. Understand that the mental fog is merely the metabolic exhaust of an overstimulated machine that has entered its automated cool-down sequence. Instead of engaging with the terrifying thoughts of empty meaning, forcing focus, or fleeing back to the screen, let your conscious awareness drop out of the abstract thoughts and anchor itself directly into the raw physics of your immediate terrain. Feel the heavy pull of gravity against your spine, track the cold temperature of the air entering your lungs, and let your body tolerate the silence, giving your receptors the time they need to naturally restore their baseline sensitivity and pull your consciousness back into true, unpolluted weight.